Okay, good evening, everyone. We are on the record. Today is Monday, October 5th, 2020. We had a 4 p.m. start. This is a regular caucus meeting of the Municipal Council. In effort to adhere to social distancing protocols and best practices imposed by the city and state authorities, the City of Jersey City has canceled all public meetings and closed non-essential services as of March 16, 2020, until further notice. As a result, this council caucus will be held virtually as a video conference with public access. We had a scheduled 4 p.m. start. The clock on my computer is showing 4:09 p.m. May I have a roll call for the commencement of this caucus? Councilperson Ridley.
Here.
Councilperson Frenzeri.
Here.
Councilperson Baggiano.
Here.
Councilperson Saleh. Not here yet? Okay. Councilperson Solomon.
Here.
Okay. Thank you, Council President. Councilperson Robinson.
Here.
Councilperson Lavarro.
Present.
Councilperson Rivera.
Here.
And Council President Waterman.
Here.
We have 8 members in attendance at 4:09 p.m. In addition, at its time of its preparation, the agenda of this meeting was similarly disseminated on Thursday, October 1st, 2020 at 1 p.m. to the mayor, council, business administrator, and the newspapers, and posted on the World Wide Web, so I can certify as to our total compliance with the Sunshine Law. When Councilperson Saleh arrives, if he can just either text or announce his time of arrival, and I will record that for the record. We will not have Brian Platt tonight. We're going to have Melissa instead of Brian. So Melissa, you can introduce yourself for the folks at home and for all of us here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Melissa Kazakowicz, Director of the Office of Innovation and Assistant Business Administrator to Brian Platt.
Thanks so much, Melissa. I appreciate that. I did not want to butcher that last name. So with that being said, we're going to move on to our first reading ordinances. With that being said, item 3.1, City Ordinance 20-089. It's an ordinance creating Chapter 187, inclusionary zoning of the Municipal Code, requiring the inclusionary zoning, inclusionary of affordable housing units in all development projects with residential which have received use variances or increased density or height. Do we want to handle these one by one?
Hello?
Any questions?
I have plenty of questions. Shall I just go right ahead?
Anybody else? Go ahead, because you know what? Would probably be easy if I go around this way here. Everybody get a fair chance. Okay. Ward
Okay.
A, do you have any, Councilman Wrigley, you have any questions?
No, not right now.
Okay. Mira, do you have any?
Not at the moment, but I might jump in a little bit later.
Okay. Rich, do you have any?
Not at the moment, Joyce.
Okay. Yusef is not here, so when he comes on, if you have any questions. Solomon?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'll start with just sort of more technical questions, just to make sure I understand everything. So I'll just go in order of the ones that I noted. So the first question is under applicability. It appears to include any redevelopment plan amendment, as opposed to any redevelopment plan amendments that increase the square footage or the unit mix. And I was wondering if my interpretation is correct, and if so, why?
I'm here to speak on the item, as well as Tanya Marione and Beth McManus. If Tanya and Beth want to turn their cameras and audio on, as well as Nick Strasser helped draft the ordinance as well, so we can all answer questions if you guys have them. If we look at what triggers the ordinance, so it's for projects over 15 units, right? A project, an individual building or project needs to be over 15 units. It has to be requesting a change of 5 or more additional units or an additional 5,000 square feet. And they can request that change through either a C variance, a D variance, or a redevelopment plan amendment. So I hope that that answers your question, that it's not any redevelopment plan amendment, it's any redevelopment plan amendment where there would be basically additional density or units or square footage, and that is typically what we would get in a redevelopment plan amendment. So for example, there could be a way that if, say, the use went from a non-residential use to a residential use, that would be triggered as well.
So that makes sense to me. I don't know if the legal language as written confirms that, because it's in, and this is maybe a question for Nick, it's a 1, 2, 3 clause with an or at the end of both. So I read that as saying just any redevelopment plan amendment in a new construction or existing building would trigger it, which I didn't think was the intent that Director Chialone just described. So it's more of a technical question, but I just want us to kind of clarify.
Yeah, Council, I think you make a really good point. I think what we need to do is make sure that the changes say that the redevelopment plan amendment is consistent with the use variances or the density changes described in 1 and 2.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah,
that way it's not confusing to say it's any redevelopment plan. It's specifically the ones that with the conditions that Nisi just described.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Nick. So the next question.
That's actually a very good technical comment. Absolutely.
You guys can put me on the law department staff.
Nick,
So the next.
I'm sorry,
Councilman.
I think that might not be, I think it may not supposed to be a number 3. I don't think anything I just said makes a clear sentence, but I don't know if there's a number 3. Is it just or and then redevelopment plan amendment?
Yeah, it's the way it reads now. It's additional 5 units or new residential units or 5,000 square feet or redevelopment plan change. So we need to clarify.
Good catch, Councilman.
We need to clarify the specific details of what the redevelopment plan change would entail that would trigger this ordinance.
Got it. Okay, great.
Yeah, good catch. We should look at that.
So Nick,
Councilman.
I'm sorry, before you guys continue, we got cut off a little bit. There was
Correct.
like a freeze. So Nick, you got cut off when you were speaking, when you were answering
Yes.
Councilman Solomon. So if you can just repeat what you had answered him, if you don't mind. And if we are going to add anything to the ordinance, if you can just email me the change, I'll upload it tonight so then it appears. This is a first reading, so we're not really amending anything at this point.
Absolutely. What I was saying, can everybody hear me okay now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Sure. What I was saying is Councilman Solomon makes a good point, because the way this reads is it appears that any redevelopment plan amendment could trigger this ordinance. But the purpose of the redevelopment plan amendment item is that it would only trigger in the event there was increased density or a use variance trigger through the redevelopment plan application process or change process. So we need to clarify 187.3A number 3 to clarify which redevelopment plan amendments would trigger the ordinance. And so, like I mentioned, as you requested, I'll draft the language with Nisi and Tanya and Beth and make sure we get it over to you either tonight or first thing tomorrow morning.
Perfect. Thank you all.
Councilman Solomon. I'm sorry, this is Councilman Labarro. Can I propose language to that effect? We're talking about 187-3A, correct?
Yeah, that's what my question was.
May I propose language?
What language? Because they're going to write it to clarify what James said. What do you want to propose?
I'm going to share my screen and you can.
Wait a minute. Go ahead. Okay.
So this is the section. I propose to amend applicability so that these lines are clarified to read as follows. In terms of number 1, instead of an additional 5 or more residential units, to change it to say an increase by 5 or more residential units, including but not limited to by zoning amendment or variance pursuant to any section of New Jersey statutes annotated 40:55D-70C, 70D, beyond the number of residential units permitted as of the effective date of this chapter. And then number 2, below that, for the 5,000 square feet, it says an increase by 5,000 square feet or more, using similar language, including but not limited to, blah, 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 beyond the residential floor area permitted as the effective date of this chapter. On the redevelopment plan, it says hello?
Yusuf J. Saleh.
Welcome, Yusuf.
Okay, go ahead, Rolando, because Nick, I want you to because I get clarity here. Go ahead.
So then the third item about the redevelopment plan says a redevelopment plan amendment in a new construction or an existing building, striking that and replacing it with an approval in conjunction with any redevelopment plan pursuant to the local redevelopment housing law that is adopted or amended after the effective date of this chapter. Fourth clause that says nothing in the subsection precludes the city from imposing an affordable housing set aside in a development not required to have a set aside pursuant to this chapter. And this just simply clarifies the language and the scope of the applicability requirements in the ordinance. Does not substantively change what was originally written, but I think the intention remains the same as was presented originally by Anicia.
So then Nick, well, okay, look, Nick, are you on? Because I know I can't.
I am, Council President.
Oh, okay. So Nick, just clarify what Anicia said. Make sure it's in the ordinance, because Rolando's saying it's saying what Anicia said. So could you just clarify what Anicia was saying in the ordinance? Okay.
Right. What
Okay.
Anicia was saying is that the terms of 1 and 2, so an increase by 5 or more residential units, that would come by way of a redevelopment plan amendment, or additional 5,000 square feet would come by way of redevelopment plan amendment.
Okay, now we're back.
Number 3,
Going in and out.
Yeah, I froze. I don't know about you guys.
Me
It totally
too.
froze.
Yeah,
on
we
my
did. We did. Nick, if you
Okay.
can back up to
all right.
answer the council president again. It's not you, Nick. It's the,
Okay.
it's-
Right.
The whole system is going.
Okay, let's try that again. All right. So what Anicia was saying, and I think is that part number 3, where it talked about the redevelopment plan amendment. It
Correct.
needs to be a redevelopment plan amendment that requests an additional 5 units or more in a residential,
Correct.
as in number 1, or 5,000 square feet of additional residential floor area. So in other words, incorporating the terms of 1 and 2, but
Mhm.
incorporating in terms of a redevelopment plan amendment as opposed to a zoning variance. Anicia, did I summarize that properly?
Yes, and what we can do is, Rolando, if you want to send that text,
Right.
Nick, we can adjust. We can make sure that we review this and we review the language we have in the ordinance and make sure that it's crystal clear.
Okay.
The applicability.
The applicability. Okay.
I'll send the link.
Jermaine, you have any questions? Because I start with Solomon and then.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I have a bunch more. Sorry. I don't know how you want to do it, Council President. I was just going through a list that I had.
We'll go around the table at least once. Go ahead.
Sorry, so you want me to keep going, or do you want to just do one question per person and keep going around?
Do one question per person and go around. This way here, everybody will have a chance.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. My question is, if 5 or more units or 5,000 or more square foot happens, is the entire building or entire project subject to 20%, or is it subject to the 20% of the additional units? So if we was to do 5 units, and we would say 20% of the 5 units or 20% of the entire project?
The way this is written at this time is of the entire project.
So if it was 20 units and they asked for 10 more, we would do 20% of 30 units.
30, correct. Correct.
Okay. Excuse me. Danny, you have any questions?
No, I'm good.
No. Okay. I don't have any, right? Okay, we back around. Denise, do you have any? I'm just trying to move this on quickly.
No, I'm good right now.
Okay. Mira, anyone else? Okay,
Yeah,
James, go ahead.
Joyce, if we're gonna make all these changes,
it shouldn't be on Wednesday night's council meeting. They should pull it, and we should get the paperwork and read the whole thing and see what all these changes are.
Mhm.
Well, so far, the only change we're gonna make is to
Right.
applicability, and we would have that to you ASAP, either tonight or
Right.
early tomorrow morning.
Correct. Because
Okay,
each time
so
we
then-
do the affordable, Rich, what I'm finding out, each time we do the affordable, this inclusionary zoning is always like another change, another change, another change. At this point, we got to get something on the books. So
Right.
that's why everyone's here and they can put their input, and then the final is, you know, when they update it, that's it. Because there's always changes, always. So we just got to come to agree with something and let's move forward. Solomon, you had another question?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so a couple more questions. So, under the exemptions, there's two exemptions, numbers 2 and 3. Any project undertaken by the Jersey City Housing Authority and any rezoning initiated by the city as a result of a master plan update. And I just wanted to ask the planning staff what the kind of policy rationale behind both the exemptions were.
I'll let Tanya, do you want to take that one? Yeah, so I mean, you all know we're in the middle of a master plan update, and I think the idea is that whatever zoning we propose, if there's a change, like for example, there will be changes made to the R1. Maybe it won't be the entirety of the R1, but that whatever zoning we would propose, we would think would be the accurate zoning. It wouldn't be an upzoning request from us. It would be more of what we like to call corrective zoning. And I think we need I don't think that it has to preclude affordable housing, but I think that the goal when we're writing the new zoning or the corrective zoning would be to make sure that it was accurate.
Is
Okay.
there, so I just, on that point, I mean, is there for the master plan, is there a way to write that exemption kind of narrowly to that specific example? Because my concern would be we go through the master plan rezoning, and we may be rezoning R1 through R5. I don't know if the redevelopment plans will be rezoned as part of the master plan recommendations. And so it feels like any zoning of units of a building with more than 15 units per the ordinance we would want to apply, whereas R1 would be units that are the building doesn't have 15 units, it's less than that. So I just want to.
It becomes very tricky in what we call straight zoning. And a lot of the reason that we're able to tie the 20% on site into straight zoning is because we're connecting it to variances. When we're in the redevelopment world, the law is very much broader, right? And so the law is clear on affordable housing and has been since the last court case that there has to be something called the compensatory benefit. And so in order to write a redevelopment, not a redevelopment plan, like let's say we're going to redo the R1 zone, you couldn't just have the affordable housing piece in there without having like a bonus or, compensating somebody for that extra unit, if that makes any sense. That's why we tie it very specifically to the C and the D variances, at least in the world that's not redevelopment. But also just remember that any rezoning, whether in straight zoning or a redevelopment plan amendment, still comes in front of you, the council, to vote on. So it's not like this is some sort of like a way around anything. It's just what it means is it puts the control in the council's hands rather than if we tried to write an ordinance that gave the most amount of flexibility so that you don't have to necessarily amend this ordinance in order to do something that the council wanted to do, for example. So if there was some reason why after the master plan, some corrective action needed to happen that you didn't want saddled with the 20% set aside, that is a prerogative that the administration and the council should be able to do if necessary, though it's still voted on by you all. So if there was something in there that you thought should follow it, then that would be part of the process and can be discussed. There's not a lot of times that a rezoning is undertaken fully by the city without some sort of external pressure or request. So it's a pretty rare circumstance, but we had to anticipate that that could happen It probably would be minor and likely to maybe adjust things or, level things. And that if we put this, if we allowed this to override that, then it might inhibit the ability to do something. It was just trying to anticipate every likely scenario, but we don't have anything in particular in mind. I think Tanya is mentioning, we know there's probably something coming with the R1, but that probably wouldn't have, needed to be triggered by this anyway.
So I guess the specific worry that I have is that if through the master plan process, we try to push rezonings or redevelopment plans, that we would in essence exempt them entirely from this. There's obviously other outs to the 20% throughout the ordinance, but to entirely exempt them from this, I guess it's my concern that could someone interpret that statute that way? As
you could see, we haven't had this ordinance in place for the last year. We've just been discussing it, but we're not really putting stuff in front of you that doesn't have what the spirit of this is, right? I mean, it's pretty rare that something comes in front of you all that doesn't already have it. So it's not that we're not already operating in that manner. I think it just allowed the flexibility if needed. Again, you guys are the ones who get to vote on it. So
I have to comment on that because there's nothing that's been put in front of us that captures the spirit of an inclusionary zoning ordinance to date.
Most of the rezonings have had some form of requirement of affordable housing.
Yeah, probably less than 5% or less at best. It's I don't think I've seen anything yet that's come before us in the past, in my past 8 years that was more than 5%. So it completely misses the mark in that sense. I think it's
okay. Well, let's not debate that now. Is there more that are of concern in the ordinance?
I mean, I did more technical initially. So what about the exemption for the housing authority? In theory, a housing authority project should have more than 20% affordable. So is there, I guess, what's the thought process on that clause?
Oh, housing.
What you said, James? I couldn't hear you.
The Jersey City Housing Authority projects are exempted from this. Kind of why and what the thinking was there.
Well, the housing authority, by its own default nature, is building type of housing that we would consider affordable housing, but it has different rules. It has to follow. It wouldn't fall under like UHAC guidelines. It has its totally own system. Making it follow this exactly, I think, would mess with their federal standards. But I mean, it's more than, they're building things that are way more than the minimums in this.
Sure.
It's not 100%, right? I mean, that's the type of work that they do.
I think the only concern on my end on this clause would be to draft it in a way that ensures that if the housing authority is doing a sort of public-private mixed income project, that then it would meet the requirements. So it's not my concern would be
even in that case, their units have to meet the standard of the housing authority's units. They would not meet the UHAC standards. They would meet, actually their requirements are very different. So that's what it's more about. It's less about like the set aside, it's more about the requirements.
Okay, so I understand that point, but can we draft it in a way that makes that point, right? Because it's just very broadly written. So, we're just trying to prevent, or I'm just trying to think of potential loopholes and just draft the language a little more narrowly so that they're not, that you don't get a project that gets built that in theory is 10% affordable when it could have been more because housing was somehow a partner, right? If you're just saying where affordable units are falling under a different sort of guidelines and restrictions, I think most people think, okay, that makes sense, but just to draft it in that manner.
I mean, housing authorities building stuff on their own lands, and they would have to get federal sign off to be able to do that. I hear what you're saying. I can't contemplate how that works from a process standpoint. So, I mean, that wasn't our concern here. Our concern here is not saddling them with UHAC guidelines and the guidelines of our specific AMIs that they can't possibly meet because they have their own restrictions.
Okay.
I'll just leave it there. You could put in language that said exactly what you just said, that they don't follow UHAC, but was good. Can you guys help explain the approving authority concept? So for both a redevelopment plan amendment and a zoning variance, when does the developer go to the approving authority? When does the approving authority make its kind of recommendation or decision? And to what extent does your council have ability to overrule the approving authority?
Could I ask the question too, with the ordinance, there's policies too, correct? What is under the different policies? Could some of this be put into policies? You know?
Oh, in section 188?
Right.
Certain details of the specifics of the units can be put into section 188. This is more
Okay.
the overarching ordinance for the set aside.
Correct. That's what, because I think the policies, some of this could be put in policies.
It could be, yeah, and we do
Okay.
have to, I think as we've mentioned before, right after this ordinance goes through, we would have to update
Correct.
188 to reflect this, because right now they'd be in conflict. Because
Correct.
when section 188 was put in front of you the last time, when this the prior ordinance was first written, they went in conjunction with each other, and so right now they would not work together. We would need to update that as well.
Okay. All right. Okay. Someone else?
I have plenty.
Sorry, I just asked the question about the approving authority.
So the approving authority is only triggered when a project doesn't meet the standards of the original set aside, the 20%. If a project meets the 20%, the approving authority does not.
So I lost. Sound was lost.
Yep,
Yeah.
I saw that.
We back.
So
We
if
will-
a project is asking for something different than a 20% on-site set aside, then it needs to work with the approving authority, and in all the things that are laid out here, there's they have to submit fiscal analyses, or have to submit 2 fiscal analyses. They would have to request some sort of leniency from it in the various categories that are in here, and the approving authority is mixed with the people that would be able to look at, number one, what's the affordable housing need in that area? What is the status of the trust fund, for example, or what are the needs throughout the city? And what is the current situation in that project, and be able to review it for fiscal, for the fiscal analysis, to be able to see if any of those reliefs should even be granted at all.
Can I just give examples, make sure I fully understand? So first, there's a redevelopment plan is amended. It requires 20% affordable on site, and in conjunction with the ordinance. The developer is going for site plan approval, and the developer says, that requirement is too burdensome. I want to shift some of my percent to off-site. Are they allowed at that point to then go to the approving authority and say, the redevelopment plan says 20%, but I want to do 10%, and I want, I want to exchange the rest in payment of lieu. Is that kind of happens?
I'll just correct one thing. They're not if the redevelopment plan. Oh my God, did we freeze again?
Go ahead.
So the approving authority can't give any, fluctuation from what the zoning is. So if the zoning as part of a redevelopment plan said you needed to have 10% on site, for example, then it's 10% on site. The zoning would have had to give that flexibility. If they were coming to the city and asking for a change to the zoning, right? They were asking for a redevelopment plan amendment. The default would be, okay, you'd like a redevelopment plan amendment for, I don't know, an additional 100 units, for example. We'd say, well, the inclusionary zoning ordinance requires you to put 20% on site. If they said through that process, I don't want to do 20% on site, for example. I think we were going back to your example. I'd like to do 10% on site. We would then require them to show us why they can't do 20% and come up with the alternative. So if it was off-site, as you mentioned, they would have to meet the things that were shown here. They'd have to show Wi-Fi on that site. They would have to show that they have another site lined up. There's some rules in here about what you have to have for the other site. You have to have it secured. It has to already have the zoning in place. It has to have, there's a series of things that have to be in place. And then based on that, they'd have to pay for a fiscal analysis. And based on all of those things, that's how the determination would be made. So it's putting the onus on them. It's not, the idea here is not to allow an easy out. It's to look at the real financial situation and real project conditions to determine what the situation is on the ground. The intent here is to build affordable housing units. So if building the project becomes infeasible and we would get 0 units, then it is our intent that it is better to get more units and actually have them built than to make it overly onerous so we get no units. So that is the situation as we've set it up, but it's pretty, there's rigorous standards that they would have to meet to do other than 20% on site.
So just so I make sure I understand it. So yeah. if it's a redevelopment plan amendment and they're looking to not meet the 20%, they're requesting the amendment. The amendment will go to the approving authority. The approving authority will, discuss it and make its determination. But at the end of the day, it still comes to the council because any redevelopment plan amendment is still going to get voted on.
Absolutely.
If it's a zoning variance, then in theory that the approving authority approving it, and then it would go to the Board of Adjustment. Is that
Correct.
accurate?
It's a little tricky because for the zoning board, there's a little bit different rules just in terms of the approving authority can have less. I mean, that's really between the individual applicant and the zoning board. The approving authority, it's difficult for the approving authority to get too much in between that, right? Because nobody else other than that body has the ability to really step in there. But usually at the zoning board, we're talking about much smaller numbers. It would have to go through a process, but it's much more likely that the discussions we're talking about are happening due to redevelopment plan amendments.
Right. Okay.
Because you can't really do, like at the zoning board, you're not really supposed to, do like a this for this, kind of thing. They can use it as positive criteria, for example. They can say, we'll do 10% or 20% or whatever on site as a positive criteria for variance. Tanya can speak to that more if you'd like.
I think that makes sense. So I just 2 more kind of specific kind of small scale changes, and then I'll pause and let other folks talk because I have a few bigger picture things, but the 2 other small ones. Just on the fiscal analysis, I think we should include language that says the fiscal analysis has to discuss the feasibility of the project with potential different subsidies. Just so as the approving authority and potentially the council are thinking about the trade-offs between an abatement and the amount of affordable housing. And there are, there's tax revenue trade-offs and affordable housing trade-offs, but I think we should just clarify. And then the payment in lieu map, I just think the language should be clarified to say that both the map and the payment amounts have to be updated annually, because right now the language only really talks about the map being updated annually.
There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. That's why the language in the ordinance just sets the base condition, because the intent here is not to update the ordinance annually, so only the map will get updated annually, and these are the minimums, or else we'd have to come back every single year and update the ordinance, and that's not the intent.
So I guess is it written in at some point that, that the council should update these? Because I think the payment should, every 3 to 5 years update.
No. The payments definitely increase. We're just saying it's done via map change rather than ordinance change. Because it says it's a minimum is the language used, I believe. Nick and I worked on this. There's no instance where the payment in lieu is any less than what is listed. So the idea is that the map, this document that has the payment numbers right on it, gets updated annually, as but the numbers in the ordinance just become the starting point. We had to put something in to tie it back to the map. We actually thought about putting no numbers in the ordinance to not have that confusion, but we wanted to make sure there was some starting point that got put somewhere. But it would be the numbers on the map.
Right.
Right. Yeah, Councilman, the numbers in the ordinance are the numbers on the map, but the ordinance says that those numbers increase by 2% January 1st of each year. So the idea is that's the baseline, and then every January 1st is 2% over and above that as the minimum.
Okay. Does it make sense to maybe update those via resolution? So if the map analysis comes back and that, the 25K should be 33K this year or whatever, and then there's an annual resolution before the council.
Like
so the
submit the map?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, that's fine. Not a problem.
All right, those are my kind of technical questions, so I'll pause now and then.
What we could do on that point, Councilman Solomon, we can, the first year, as of January, we can submit this map and put it into the record and show like this is the first year. That's fine. No problem with doing that.
Jermaine, any questions?
I have a question. Can we legally tier the 5% maximum, or is that has to be standard across the all 5 tiers? So just to say like, okay, in a certain area, you mandatory 5%, but closer to the waterfront, it's a mandatory 10 or 12%.
Well, that is something we could have looked at, but that's not the ordinance as we've written it right now. I mean, that's not what's in introduction.
Is that something that we can legally do? Because I mean, my fear is that we continue going down the same road of having, you know, people buy out of certain areas and we don't get any, you know, any affordability in certain areas. And then we're still pushing it all to, you know, one side of the city, which, you know, will continue the tale of two cities kind of conversation.
I think that's exactly the kind of stuff that the approving authority is supposed to look at, is where are the needs and where do we want to build affordable housing and what's feasible. And if that's what the council is asking, to have a push for higher percentages in certain parts of the city, then that's something that we could do.
I mean, I think I don't know how the council feels, but I would really like to tier that part as well. Just the buyout provisions, but I'm froze. Can anyone hear me?
Okay, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, the buyout provisions, the same way we have the buyouts, it's tiered amounts. I think it would be, you know, a good thing that we have also a tiered mandatory how much affordable unit in each area.
Well, my understanding is that we don't want to wait any longer to move this forward. But, you know, I will take direction from the council president on this issue.
I would support Councilman Robinson's call for such a differentiation. I have questions about what the tiers are, but given whatever the highest tiers would be, that you could set the number as at the maximum or the minimum affordability on site at the maximum of 20%, and then kind of go down from each tier by a certain percentage based on those different tiers. That's without me knowing exactly what those tiers are and what constitutes what differentiates one tier from another, which is what my question would be. But I don't think I'm at that point for my question, so I'll save.
So I do think, though, the map, I just want to clarify, was the map, I believe the map was sent around. We did share the map. You know, as part of.
How do you arrive at each tier? Like, what's the basis for designing one tier after another?
Just real quick, let me double back. If you go into section 187.5 in the payment in lieu, we did take this into consideration, trying to provide some parameters for the approving authority to take some things into consideration as to help determine whether or not it was important, more important or less important. It's always important. Let me just say that first of all, if the units be on site. And so some of the things that we put into there, it's only really 2 things. We had more in the beginning. Originally, we even asked to say, like, you know, maybe don't include it if it's an opportunity zone. And the more we thought about it, the more we realized an opportunity zone is the perfect place for affordable housing. But if you take a look at 187.5C, it gives just 2 kind of parameters on things that you want to take into consideration, whether or not those are important places to have affordable housing. So, for example, the first one is at 1 or more miles outside of the path. It's important to have more affordable housing within the path radius because we know for a fact that's where the most unaffordable housing is going to be. So we did attempt to provide some parameters based on best practices as to where we were seeing affordable housing being developed and not developed for the approving authority.
Okay. Is it my turn?
Okay, so we, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm like on an important call too, so I'm like in and out, so I asked, Councilman Rivera to kind of step in when I'm not, but I heard the question. Could we move forward with it? What we can do is revisit some of these things. Certain things could be in the policies, but because there's 9 of us and we want different things, I really want to move forward with this. What your concerns are, you definitely could put it down. What can be added in the policies, we will add. No doubt, we will add, but we need some data too to see how this is all working. We don't even have inclusionary zoning. I think with UHAC, they're going to give us data on exactly what's going on too. So if there are more questions, go ahead and ask the questions, but I do want to move forward. Go ahead.
I want to make a couple of points, make a point, and then I'll ask a question, which is going to be in line with what Councilman Robinson was raising, which is
you can make the point. That's fine. Everybody's here to make points. I don't have a problem with it, but I'm just telling y'all my concern. This has been my concern. That's all. I'm not saying y'all point is not valid. Every point is valid, but I'm saying we need to get something moving forward, and we need some data to tell us what's working, what's not working. We have nothing. We have nothing.
Yep.
So we're trying to create something. Is it going to be perfect? No, it's not. But it's going to give us some means of data so we can move forward and we could adjust. We can look at this another year to see what worked and what didn't work. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna just share my screen then, and I'm not looking for the perfect. So I will say that we've got a couple of good things. We started off with 2 ordinances that had applicability and exemptions in one, and we've arrived at generally where the city council was, with the exception of those exemptions. And I'll take exception and with the inclusion of exempting Jersey City Housing Authority properties and the master plan update as well. On the targeted income brackets, with regard to, and I'm sharing this screen, which is giving a comparison of what the original administration ordinance was, and then what the ordinance myself and Council President Waterman presented, and then the ordinance that we see before us today in the 3 different columns. And then on the income brackets, we did eliminate the workforce housing, which I think is a good thing. So I'll applaud that as well, and say that that's a good thing that we're focusing on moderate and low income and very low income units. And then on the term of affordability, I wanted, the administration proposed 30 years, Council President and I proposed 99 years, and we're back at 30 years with active municipal release as per UHAC requirements. I have something to say about that, but what I really want to just point out is that on the buyout provision, it's pretty much exactly the same, right? So I want to just put that on the record that that this final reconciliation that's being proposed does not in fact reconcile anything as it pertains to buyouts, and that the buyouts itself are proposed exactly the same as was proposed by the mayor and the administration, and which I would argue is a big loophole for developers to be able to find their way out of their on-site obligations, despite to the contrary, and despite what was said with regard to the approving authorities being able to put the onus. I think it was actually just said at the beginning that if they don't want to do it or something to that effect, then they'll provide information to that effect. And that, in fact, it should not be the standard by which we should be looking at. It should be something to the effect of the feasibility in that regard, and that should be the standard around that. That being said, with regard to, and following up on what Councilman Robinson, my question and clarity is on tier 1 through tier 5 and how much the payment in lieu is being calculated by. What are the geographic boundaries for tiers, and how did that, were those established, which areas were established to be within tiers? For my part, my ordinance does not include a map, just to be clear. So I'd like a copy of the map, and if there's other information explaining what where the tiers were established and what the basis of the tiers were, I'd like to have that information if that's available. It's not available in the information that was presented and available online on the online agenda, at least on my links.
Okay.
Tanya, do you want to talk about the map? I was under the impression that the map was also sent to all council members. So that I apologize for that if that's what happened. We did share it, so we thought that it was sent around. Tanya, do you want to talk about the data source and how the map was calculated?
Yeah, so the map is calculated mostly on a renter cost burden. So we've done enough of these meetings to know that a renter cost burden means that when the cost of your housing exceeds 30%. And so those tracks, when you're looking at the map, the breakout groups are based on that. So you can see like what you're seeing a buyout number, but underneath that is showing a percentage of how many folks within those. I think it's probably based on census tract. I think. Yes, it's based on census tract. How many folks within that census tract? Like, so if one census tract has 30% of the folks who are living there are experiencing cost burden for renting, that's one tier. What we've done for the map to make it easier for everybody else who needs to use it is just convert that into the 25,000 that you see. I know that sounds a little tricky, so please, if that doesn't make any sense, tell me so I can help you understand it a little bit better.
So I was under the impression that might be the case, that it was cost burden, which isn't necessarily a bad. I'm not saying it's a bad basis by which to calculate that or determine those different tiers per se. But I think there are opportunities there or possibilities that what's the word I'm looking for? Underappreciate what the dollar value should be, that the contribution should be for that developer. So for example, I'll just use an example, and I don't know what the number is because I don't have the tier map and everything in front of me. But you have, by and large, in downtown Jersey City, you have neighborhoods where the average median income is well over $100,000, and if you go by various census tracts around there, by and large, that's the number, with the exception of two census tracts. One of them being where Holland Gardens are, where the number is considerably low, very much lower than the rest of downtown Jersey City, and the other one being around the Villa Borinque, although not too far down, appreciably because of the density surrounding Villa Borinque, and so they were just below the $100,000 threshold for average median income, because the rest of the median incomes in the area are similar or increase it considerably. But the area around Holland Gardens was much lower. Yet the value of the property itself in all of those areas is considerably higher, right? Like so much higher in those areas. And so the idea that if the cost burden around those areas may be, and I'm just making this up because I don't actually know what their cost burden rates are, but if they should be out of whack with regard to what the actual median incomes around those neighborhoods are, then shouldn't it be, rather than kind of that contribution being, rather than being driven by kind of cost burden and those measures, it doesn't take into account kind of the real estate market and the opportunity for that developer and the potential windfall that developer can score by getting increased density and then buying out of those contributions as a result, buying out of their on-site obligations through much smaller contributions, because it may fall into a lower level tier than what the market would normally generate there. So I think we should look at that a lot more closely, and frankly, I just think the dollar amounts across the board there should be a lot higher, and I think it should be more comparable to the cost of the construction of a unit if we're going to go in any direction around that in terms of giving payments in lieu. And I would urge us to I'm not saying put this on hold for the next 3 months or anything like that. If I had known we were talking about this, which I didn't know, we were talking about payments in lieu, and the last time we talked about this on September 21st was the first time that was broached in literally in all of the conversations we had over the past 16 months, was even having a remotely any sort of conversation about in lieus. I'm happy to come to a quick conversation about that and quick conclusion to figure out what a number would make sense around that. But I would tell you right now that the thresholds around the different tiers are far too low, and that we should be looking at some higher numbers for across the board on that.
Now, Tanya, let me ask a question. This is based on the land value, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's where they get those numbers from, the land value.
I thought it was just cost burden already. It was just
You know.
The tiers and the colors are based on cost burden. That's how we got the breakouts. The actual number, the 25 to 35, are based on the land value per unit.
Okay.
the land value of which land value? The land value in the land that's of the where the cost burden is?
Yes, mostly those were the roughly areas where the people who were buying land were buying it with the zoning entitlements for basically 25,000 a unit or 35,000 a unit or 100,000 a unit. It goes up to 100. The top tier is 100.
Okay.
So I have
Anybody else have a question? Because we want to move on because we on this an hour. Go ahead, Denise.
I have 2 questions. So I want to make sure I understand the tier correctly. So a tier 5 where the payment would be $100,000 a unit. Are we saying that that would be if you're attempting to opt out of units in an area that is cost burden or that's not cost burden?
It's less cost burden. So usually it means people who are making more money.
Okay.
Right? Paying rent is less of a burden to them, which in the map, what it shows is a lot of downtown is in that. That is a higher number to buy out of any individual unit. It costs more.
Okay, and then the other question I had, I was trying to find it in here because I thought I saw like a mileage or something referring to off-site affordable housing. So if they are allowed to do a certain percentage off-site, does it have to remain within that same area or ward, or can you have a building, let's say in Ward D, and decide you want to do off-site in Ward F?
It has to be within the same tier. Correct.
Same tier, but not necessarily same area of the city, but same tier.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to make it the most like economically equal, like so that specifically you could not do what you were describing. You couldn't say have a building in what was the red on the map, right, in certain parts of downtown where they were the least cost burden, and say, oh, I have a 100-unit obligation, I'm going to put 50 units in my building, but I'm going to build 50 of them in Ward F or even in Ward A. We would say, no, that's not acceptable. That's not an option even on the table. You would have to put it in the same tier. So in that case, it would be close by. It would be something more equivalent. It's hard to write that in a way that thinks of every single scenario, because even if we gave a distance, there are certain parts of downtown that brush up, against say Ward F, and someone might try to put it, the land might be cheaper on the other side of like the turnpike, and someone might be able to do that. So we really didn't want to do that. We really wanted it to be more equal. Like you have to put it in an equivalent economic setting. You're not going to be able to buy a piece of land somewhere cheaper and offset those units. It needs to be equivalent from an economic standpoint.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
So
Sean.
I would like to propose an amendment to the council on the length of the term of the affordability controls, the length of affordability controls. We've gone down to 30 years from the UHAC. On September 21st, we took a straw poll of the council at the end of the caucus, talked about 65 years as the minimum term of affordability, length of affordability. I don't know how we got from there on September 21st to going to 30 years and the UHAC standards around that, although we did talk about UHAC standards for income eligibility and things of that nature, as well as for the marketing and other things of that nature as well. It was pretty clear cut leaving that meeting on September 21st that it would be 65 years. So I'm not sure how we ended up
Rolando,
reverting that.
can I interrupt for a minute? I just want to clarify, we actually spent a lot of time on this on our end, looking into what UHAC says, and it actually is the opposite. The UHAC standard basically says actually what you wanted, which was in perpetuity. It is, what it says is, it is until the city council releases them from the obligation, and in no case under 30 years. And Beth McManus is here if we need her to clarify, but it's actually the opposite. You got more than 65 years. You got unlimited until the city council relieves an individual developer from the obligation, which the city council cannot do at any term less than 30 years. There is no default in here for 30 years. If a developer hits 30 years and wants to get out of the obligation, they have to come to city council and ask for an out. There's no automatic release.
I understand there's no automatic release, but there's, well, actually, is there no automatic release?
No, there is no automatic release.
What if no action is taken?
It has to stay affordable. That's my way I understand it. We spent a lot of time trying to understand what UHAC says, and that is my understanding. Now, my understanding, and Beth can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the way this is handled in other municipalities is that when they are negotiating the specific deal with an individual developer, because usually it's part of fair share, right? It's part of meeting their obligation. The term of affordability is handled at that time, and it is negotiated with that developer at that time. And what UHAC says is it cannot be less than 30 years. So the way we've interpreted this is, absent action by council, it is until council releases them. So there's no default of 30 years. The only way that, and the AHAs would say that as well, it will say it is upon action of council, no less than 30 years. If a developer, for example, wants to put a specific out in their AHA, they say, okay, I want it to say 30 years, exactly. Well, then we've interpreted that to mean that the AHA would have to come in front of city council and be voted on, because the only authority to give them the term of affordability is you, all the council. That there's no one else who has that authority. That's the way we've interpreted what UHAC says.
So just as a quick note, Beth is stuck out of the meeting.
No, I think she got back in.
I'm back.
Oh, okay.
Beth, are you back?
Yeah, can folks hear me?
So
Do you have a camera still or no?
Can folks not hear or see me?
I can hear. Oh, there you
Okay,
are.
we see you.
So
Please
Councilman
explain the
Solomon-
UHAC. Beth, please explain UHAC, because we really wanted UHAC. So explain that, please.
Okay, the UHAC states that affordability controls shall be for not less than 30 years and until the point in time that the municipality elects to release the affordability controls. So affordability controls are, in this case, it's almost always going to be in the form of a deed restriction. That means that deed restriction shall remain in place for not less than 30 years and until the municipality has released the affordability controls. Okay. So a standard deed restriction will be if there is no action by the municipality, essentially a perpetual deed restriction.
Okay. All right.
Is
Someone
that-
else?
Is that backed up by, I believe Councilman Solomon raised this before and asked if this, by practical effect, like, does it really, like, after the 30 years, has this been tested, this theory? And why not just say 40 years or 65 years as a minimum and still give the same release powers to the city council, so that you don't open it up to somebody releasing it earlier than 30 years?
Well, the deed restriction should state 30 years, not less than 30 years, and until released. So if you guys have a developer coming in at, say, 20 years that says, hey, I'd like to have my deed restriction released, I want to convert my affordable units to market rate units, not only does the council have the ability to refuse that request, but it would actually be, it's not just a release of the deed restriction. Okay. In that case, you would actually be taking an affirmative action to change the deed restriction. I think, and it would be I don't know that it would be literally unprecedented, but it's not something that I've ever heard be done successfully or actually even requested that a developer has tried to get out of their affordability controls in less than 30 years. So I think that the chances of that, of the request is low. The chance that a city council such as your folks who are actively interested in this taking that action, I think is very, very low. But after
30 years.
Yeah, so after 30 years, the more likely request, you're gonna have a developer come in on maybe 30 years in one day, or 35 or 40 years at some point. And he's gonna make the request that he or she has presumably fulfilled the terms of the affordability controls, done so properly, and they want to have it released. One, it is entirely within the council's jurisdiction to say yes or no, or to alter the request, you know, yes, no, or yes in 5 years from now, or whatever you decide is appropriate. There's no pressure, there's no obligation for the city council to take that action. You can simply do so as you see fit based on the individual merits of each application. If the city wanted to put in place an alternative length of controls, either in this ordinance or in Chapter 188, I think it's within your legal jurisdiction to do so. That's a policy decision, but I don't think there's any downside to keeping a minimum of 30 years, knowing that the power to extend that, let me strike that. It's not an extension, but the power to release it sits entirely within the city council.
So I'd like to ask the law department then to, for practical effectiveness, to provide us some sort of evidence that this, in fact, that the extension of it beyond 30 years continues without the council having released it. So, for example, I'm just going to give an example right now, which is not necessarily an inclusionary zoning piece, but had to do with I'm not sure how the affordability or deed restriction was, but 100 Montgomery in Jersey City saw that its 30 years was going to come to expiration. I don't know what the deed restriction was on that. I don't know how the language is written on that, but it was presented to us as a city council at the time that it was coming to expire and that we had no choice but to negotiate a deal with them to try to extend the affordability for it. And we only managed to extend it for 50% of the units for that 100 Montgomery project. And then we ultimately allowed them and gave them the zoning to build 25 Christopher Columbus or whatever that development is over there with the school and additional units there at something like 5% affordable housing plus a school. And when I look back on that, what a raw deal that was for us at the time, because we thought that we had to maintain that we were in danger of losing all of our affordability there and potentially throwing people to the curb at 100 Montgomery.
Well,
I'd like to know from the law department what the practical deed restriction was, if the similar language was being employed there. If it was, then there was some malpractice on our part, if that was the case, that we were led to believe as a city council that we were going to lose affordability. In fact, I don't know of any deed restriction at this point that has come before the city council where anybody has suggested up till now that whatever they were, whether they came from any other via any other method or whether it be through a tax abatement, whether it came through Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars, or whether it came from some other mechanism, that anyone has ever told us that after 30 years, if it's true that it is and it extends beyond and there's evidence of that to that effect, then I am 100% for that. And I thank you for that great information. And I'm happy to just say 30 years and allow for the release of the control from the council. But
let me ask
I would like evidence to that effect.
Okay, but let me ask this question. This is under the UHAC law, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
That's
the
correct,
other 100 Montgomery Street was not under UHAC. It's two different, if I'm correct. So
Correct.
it's two different. That's why we want a UHAC, because it seems like UHAC is more strict. The regulations are.
Correct.
That's why. UHAC is totally different. So that's why.
You took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say. That's the advantage of what we're specifically referring to UHAC, is you get the UHAC standard as opposed to using another standard with a specific term. The other advantage is UHAC is codified as part of the administrative code. So you're referring to something that specifically comes from the state government to say, this is the standard that we have developed, and we are applying that standard as opposed to using whatever your own standard may be. And as we described, the UHAC standard.
you're presenting it so matter-of-factly. I'm saying it's so easy to prove. That's fine. Just prove it to me that it goes beyond 30 years. You've got an example
Okay,
that it doesn't.
okay,
And,
let's don't argue. Let's don't argue. We're going to follow UHAC. We felt like it was a regulatory standard, and it was strong. That's why we wanted UHAC. I mean, even with all of the experts coming, they was mentioning UHAC. So we have UHAC. Now we have to follow
the
up.
experts also came to us and said that the
we
whole
can't
does
compare
40
both.
years.
We can't compare one contract against another because we don't know what was written there. That we just can't. It's not fair. It's not.
I'm not asking, okay, so disregard my my request for 100 Montgomery. I'm asking if you got a UHAC example that says a project that went beyond 30 years and the affordability extended beyond the life of the original 30 years without it being released by the governing body of the approving authority.
Beth.
Share that with me. I'm sold.
Thing up the council.
Let us speak, Rolando. I know you're upset about this. Let us speak. I mean, we just got to come to some type of agreement. There's no need for us to get all upset. We trying to come to some type of agreement for the people. Now, Beth, speak. I know everybody's upset about it, but we got to get something done. Go ahead.
One quick note on UHAC. The rules were adopted in 2004. So there's nobody that can point to an example of a project that has had the minimum 30 years in place, went to the municipality with the request, had it decided and so forth. We simply haven't had the rules in place for that time. The provision has been through the courts in a particular case. It was upheld. So I don't think I don't have any concern about the legality of the term. But I just wanted folks to know that the UHAC has only been in place for 2004, which explains why we can't talk about experience other towns have had, and also why I suspect that Montgomery project is not subject to it.
Okay. All right then. Okay, Sean.
Yes,
Move to the next one. This is it.
already.
Council President, before you move on, I'm just going to ask that I'm going to share with the council as well as the other
We're
members.
going to move on, Rolando. This is the council is the other council saying, could we please move on? Okay.
I'm going
That's
to
what I'm
share.
saying. This is the hour and something now.
I'm going to share with the council amendments and to the ordinance that I would ask the council to consider. I'll send it to you via email and I'll send it
Could
to
you
you.
please send it to them
everybody.
email? Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Item 3.2, City Ordinance 20-090. An ordinance supplementing Chapter 282, of the Jersey City Code, Health and Sanitation, establishing standards for the maintenance and servicing of portable lavatories.
Nick,
Any questions?
you on the air? Could you explain this, please?
Sure, Council President. This was based upon some concerns of, I think, Council President, you brought it to my attention, concerns regarding particularly construction areas where porta potties had not been maintained and were starting to overflow and starting to smell and causing a quality of life problem for the people who live near them. So there is no standard put in the code in order to say how often these need to be cleaned. Now, to be clear to the members of the council, this is not COVID related. There are standards that the CDC has in terms of public bathrooms. This is not meant to mess with that at all. The standard here is a minimum cleanliness of once a week to be certified by whoever handles the cleaning, with a specific note on the porta john as to who is responsible for the cleaning. So the idea here is to make sure that these are clean in the normal course, and they don't have a problem where they're going weeks without being cleaned. So it's really just designed to make sure there's a minimum standard, identify who is responsible, and put in the code that standard.
So question, Nick, what would be the penalty if it's not upheld?
It'd be a standard ordinance violation of a maximum of $2,000.
Okay.
So it would be no different than any other ordinance violation.
Anyone else? Next, go ahead, Sean.
Item 3.3, City Ordinance 20-091, an ordinance supplementing Chapter 332, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 8, Permit Parking, Section 332, 58 parking restrictions in residential zones, amending Zone 10 to include Ocean Avenue between Fulton Avenue and Stegman Street. Any questions or comments? Item 3.4, City Ordinance 20-092, an ordinance supplementing Chapter 332, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 3, Parking, Standing, and Stopping, amending Section 332-27, Angle Parking on Mallory Avenue, my goodness, between. Questions or comment? Hearing none. Okay. Item 3.5, City Ordinance 20-093, an ordinance supplementing Chapter 332, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 3, Parking, Standing, Stopping, Section 332-28.1.c, Electric Vehicle Charging Areas, designating electric vehicle charging spaces at various locations citywide. Any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, on to our second reading ordinances. Item 4.1, City Ordinance 20-081, an ordinance amending certain provisions of Bond Ordinance 18-038, finally adopted by the City of Jersey City on May 9th, 2018, providing for various capital improvements for the city and appropriating $47,282,671. Therefore, and providing the issuance of $45,031,115 in general improvement bonds or notes of the city to finance the same. Any questions or comments?
Question. Can someone explain what the 200,000 for the path side is for? I'm sorry, that's the next ordinance. Is it? I'm sure. Which one am I confusing this?
We're on the first one, the first bond ordinance.
Sorry, that's a mistake. I have no question on this one.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. Item 4.2, City Ordinance 20-082, an ordinance of the City of Jersey City and the County of Hudson, New Jersey, providing for various capital improvements for the City of Jersey City and appropriating $31,500,000, therefore, and providing the issuance of $30 million in general improvement bonds or notes of the City of Jersey City to finance the same. Any questions or comments?
Can I get an explanation on the Pathside Museum funding?
Yeah, we can follow up with that for you.
Okay.
What do you mean? That's this is second reading, and so the vote is on Wednesday, and I asked about this on first reading. This is
Okay, Rolando, I'll make sure they give it to you tomorrow. Melissa, please make sure you have it. I know Brian is not here, so
Yes,
please
ma'am.
make sure
I
you
have
have
it
it.
in my notes. I got it for you.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay. Item 4.3, City Ordinance 20-083, an ordinance acknowledging the transfer and assignment of the property known as 295 Thomas McGovern Drive, Jersey City, and consenting to the transfer of the tax exemption held by Exeter Thomas McGovern Land Urban Renewal LLC to CICF 2 NJ1B02 Urban Renewal pursuant to Section 9.1 of the Financial Agreement and NJSA 48:20-22 of the Long-Term Tax Exemption Law. Any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Item 4. Go ahead.
Council President. Just going back to the previous bond ordinance. Can I just ask the law department a question on that? So we received the confidential memo, and with the delineation or a breakdown of the various expenditures for both the buildings, the parks, and other capital expenses. And so as it pertains to the actual use and expenditure of that, if for example, if the administration, rather than spend the $256,000 on some $250,000 on some item in within that capital budget and they wanted to spend it on something else, would they be able to do that without coming back to the city council for additional approvals to reallocate money?
Law Department? Law Department?
And I'm purposely not citing exactly which items because I know it was cited as confidential. So, but if X dollars were allocated for X park and then wanted to spend it on Y park, that was also on the list, but to move it from there to there, or it is not on the list, could they do that?
I will get an answer for that for you tomorrow first thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President. I have no other questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Anyone else on that? Okay. All right. Item 4.4, City Ordinance 20-084, an ordinance to amend the Liberty Harbor North redevelopment plan to reduce the height permitted on Block 16, aka 333 Morris Street. Any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Item 4.5, City Ordinance 20-085, an ordinance supplementing Chapter 332, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 2, Traffic Regulation, Section 332-9, stop intersections of the Jersey City Code designated Franklin Street and Hancock Avenue, Franklin Street and Sherman Avenue as all-way stop control. Any questions or comments? Okay. Hearing none. Item 4.6, City Ordinance 20-086, an ordinance of the Municipal Council of the City of Jersey City adopting amendments to the Canal Crossing redevelopment plan. Any questions or comments? Okay. Item 4.7, City Ordinance 20-087, an ordinance providing a technical amendment to Ordinance 19-150 adopted on November 14th, 2019 to include a mandatory language omitted when the original draft was uploaded onto iCompass. Any questions or comments?
Explain that.
Yep. John did a great job on that. Item 4.8, Ordinance 20-088, an ordinance amending Chapter 1, General Provisions, Article 3, Enforcement Penalties to delegate additional enforcement powers to the municipal prosecutor and amending Chapter 3, Administration of Government, Article 14, Department of Law, Chapter 148, Discrimination, Section 148-6, Complaints, Investigation, Hearings, Chapter 245, Peddling, Soliciting, and Canvassing, Article 3, Canvassers and Solicitors, to eliminate inconsistencies in the code of relating to the municipal prosecutor. Nick, are you on?
Yes, I am here. So the issue that Mr. Hud and I had brought up to me that wanted to bring up to the council is that based upon the reorganization of municipal council, or sorry, the municipal prosecutor's office, as part of the ordinance that was passed last meeting, we would need to eliminate the amendments to Section 3-119.1, because in this particular version, it still has the municipal prosecutor's office falling under the law department. So obviously, to pass this would be inconsistent with what you passed a week ago. So come on Wednesday, I would just ask that a member of the council make an amendment to, or make a motion for an amendment to eliminate the portion of this ordinance that amends Section 3-119.1 to eliminate it. It would not be a substantial change, as this ordinance is really clarifying in terms of language and roles and responsibilities. But obviously, if you pass this, it would be inconsistent with what you passed 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Okay. We would just need that motion and a second, and we will vote on the amendment. Thanks so much, Nick. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Sean.
Okay. We have next the public request for a hearing. We have 2 more additional speakers that are added onto the list that you received on Thursday. Since then, any questions or comments on items 6.1 through 6.34? Any questions or comments on item 7.1? Any questions or comments on items 8.1 through 8.9? Any questions or comments on the claims? Okay, moving right along, on to our resolutions. Item 10.1, Resolution 20-702, a resolution authorizing refunds due to New Jersey Tax Court appeals on various property tax accounts. Any questions or comments? Item 10.2, Resolution 20-703, resolution canceled 2018 and prorated 2019 real estate taxes on a Jersey City-owned condominium unit known as 311 Washington Street, Unit 206. Any questions or comments? Before I move on, I wanted to do this before. I wanted to mark Councilperson Saleh present at 4:19 p.m. for the record, so we do have 9 council members in attendance. Apologize for that. Okay, item 10.3, City Resolution 20-704, a resolution approving the notice in lieu of a deed notice for Forest Street in accordance with NJAC 20C-7.2. Any questions or comments? Okay, item 10.4, Resolution 20-705, a resolution authorizing the execution of a mortgage subordination agreement affecting the property known as 503 Garfield Avenue, also known as Block 25902, Lot 25. Any questions or comments? Okay, item 10.5, Resolution 20-706, resolution of the Municipal Council of the City of Jersey City authorizing program contracts for summer youth programs under Community Development Block Grant, Public Service CDBG Grant Program Year April 1st, 2020 through March 31st, 2021. Any questions or comments? Okay, item 10.6, Resolution 20-707, a resolution ratifying award of emergency contract to Hague's Service Corp for the renovations of the fire alarms in City Hall due to COVID-19 for the Department of Public Works. Any questions or comments? Item 10.7, Resolution 20-708, resolution authorizing an award of a contract for the purchase and delivery of various parts for trucks, snow equipment, and automotive vehicles through the Sourcewell Purchasing Cooperative, formerly known as the National Joint Powers Alliance for the Department of Public Works, Division of Automotive. Any questions or comments? Item 10.8, Resolution 20-709, a resolution authorizing a month-to-month extension not to exceed 6 months effective as of September 15, 2020, of a contract with Temco Building Maintenance to provide janitorial services for the Department of Public Works, Division of Building and Street Maintenance. Any questions or comments? Item 10.9, Resolution 20-710 is a resolution awarding an emergency contract to Sims Metal Management for the disposition of commingled recycling materials on a month-to-month basis not to exceed 3 months for the Department of Public Works, Division of Recycling. Any questions or comments? Item 10.10, Resolution 20-711, a resolution authorizing the award of an open-ended contract to Willie's Fence Company, LLC, for chain link fencing for the Department of Public Works, Division of Park Maintenance. Any questions or comments? Item 10.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Skip, sure.
We just get a breakdown of the spend on this contract over the last year. If I recall correctly, Councilman Yoon had brought this up around a year ago and was just concerned that we were spending too much money. I just would like to kind of, if DPW can give us a breakdown of how they spent this money over the last year, that'd be great. So,
Yep, got
okay.
it. I'll make a note of that and we can get it to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Okay. Item 10.11, Resolution 20-712 is a resolution ratifying and awarding an emergency contract award to Continental Hardware for the purchase and delivery of lumber and cement supplies for City Hall basement due to COVID-19 for the Department of Public Works. Any questions or comments? Item 10.12, Resolution 20-713 is a resolution authorizing an award of a contract to Hannon Floor Covering Corp. To install and waterproof the floors in City Hall basement under state contract for the Department of Public Works. Any questions or comment? Item 10.13, Resolution 20-714 is a resolution authorizing the renewal of an open-ended contract with Schedule Nursing, Inc. for the supply and delivery of various trees for the Department of Public Works, Division of Park Maintenance. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, did we, or if the administration can clarify where we're at with the kind of, the warranties here on the trees that we're getting?
Sorry. Yeah, I think we're on a 2-year warranty, but I'll just clarify that with forestry for you.
And there was like a question, and I apologize, my memory's a little vague, but that I guess some had been delivered dead, but then the company was claiming that, you know, we killed them. So we wanted to just, I guess, figure out just whatever the procedures were to ensure that, you know, we can actively take advantage of that warranty.
Yep, gotcha.
Thanks.
Okay. Item 10.14, Resolution 20-715 is a resolution authorizing the waiver of the 20-day waiting period pursuant to NJSA 40:69A-181B for Ordinance 20-087, an ordinance providing a technical amendment to Ordinance 19-150 adopted on November 14, 2019, to include a mandatory language omitted when the original draft was uploaded onto iCompass. Any questions or comments? Okay, item.
Council President, I'm sorry. Just on 10.12, to the BA on that, I just noticed that's operating dollars on that. Can you check that to see if we can use capital dollars in lieu of?
Yeah, 10.12.
Yeah.
Yep, I'll check.
Okay.
Okay, item 10.15, Resolution 20-716, a resolution of the Municipal Council of the City of Jersey City authorizing an affordable trust fund contract with Jersey City Redevelopment Agency for 51 Crescent Avenue. Any questions or comments?
That'll be withdrawn, remember.
Okay, right. So administration will be withdrawing this at Wednesday's meeting. Sorry, it's my alarm. Alrighty. Item 10.16, Resolution 20-717, a resolution of the Municipal Council of the City of Jersey City authorizing the execution of a grant agreement and acceptance of a grant award for CARES Act funding from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. Any questions or comments?
How are these monies being appropriated?
Carmen, are you on?
I'm on. They're not, Rolando. So community development, this is the last award of the CBG CARES Act. So this is, again, I'm going through the process of getting this final award.
This is just the acceptance. You haven't determined the allocation.
Nope. Nope. This
Okay.
this should be the final tranche. And so will be coming back to you guys within this month and preparing and presenting somewhat of a plan. So.
Okay.
Okay, item 10.17, Resolution 20-718 is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Software House International for the purchase of the Quintessa, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, and SHI budget software under state contract for the Department of Finance Division of Management and Budget. Any questions or comments? Okay, item 10.18, Resolution 20-719. It's a resolution ratifying the amendment and extension of amending and extending a professional service agreement with Kriti Vekgarara Law LLC to provide specialized legal and regulatory compliance advice to the city's Department of Housing, Economic Development, and Commerce related to the city's housing and urban development and affordable housing trust fund project portfolio. Any questions or comments?
Yes, we had, I guess, passed this contract in April 15th, and it seems like, I guess, we're passing it again. Can we just get a quick update on status of this project.
I think Carmen, is that you again, Carmen?
Yep, it's me. So, so it's a status of the project. So this is an award of our in-house counsel for community development. So it's not necessarily tied to a particular project, it's tied to several projects. So it's specialized counsel as it relates to community development programs.
So I thought this attorney had been specifically working on the HUD audit, and that was specifically why we had brought her on, because she was working internally. Yep. And then had left the city, and then we wanted her services because she was mid-project.
Yep.
Is that my memory correct, or am I missing something?
Yeah. So we have a follow-up call with our HUD field office on this week, October 7th, to resume. We really had to wait on their ability to underway the project. So I can give you an update after Wednesday, or maybe next week after we go through our deliverables. But of like the 28 findings, we're down really much to like the last 10 as it relates to the audit and the specialized counsel. So if you can wait till a little bit after Wednesday, I can give you an audit update as to we have to wait for our field office to respond.
Sure. And is this attorney working just on that, or is she working on broader?
Other broader things, I would say more in line with our real estate portfolio and housing, because they tend to be more complex and niche in structure.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Item 10.19, Resolution 20-720 is a resolution of the Municipal Council of the City of Jersey City authorizing submission of the fiscal year 2021 Community Service Block Grant Csbg application to the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. Any questions or comments on this item? Okay, hearing none. So the following next couple of resolutions are considered late items. They were added after we initially published the agenda. So we will need a motion to add if we are doing so on Wednesday. So item 10.20, resolution 20-721 is a resolution ratifying the emergency contract award to DG3 North America Inc. for the purchase and delivery of hand sanitizer due to the coronavirus for the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. Any questions or comments? Item 10.21, resolution 20-722, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to JC Contracting Inc. for the install infrastructure for new electric vehicle charging stations at City Hall parking lot and Ogden Avenue at Riverview Fiscal Park, and for the Department of Administration, Division of Engineering, Traffic and Transportation. Any questions or comments on this? Okay, hearing none. Item 10.22, resolution 20-723 is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Big Top Manufacturing for the purchase and delivery of salt dome tent for the Department of Public Works, Division of Sanitation. Any questions or comments? Okay, item 10.23, resolution 20-724 is a resolution appointing Mary Watson as the fire official of the Department of Public Safety, Division of Fire and Emergency Service, Bureau of Fire Prevention.
That's going to be withdrawn too.
Withdrawn? Okay.
Yeah.
The administration will be withdrawing that as well. So with that being said, well, we won't add that, Council President.
Okay.
That's actually a late item, so we will not add that, but I'll mark that down. Any other comments or questions before I make a motion to adjourn? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn at 5:42 p.m.?
Motion.
Motion made by Councilperson Prinzary, seconded by Councilperson Vera. On the motion to adjourn at 5:42 p.m., all council members by acclamation, please say aye.
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 We are out of here at 5:42 p.m. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen who are watching at home, and the council and my staff and everybody with the administration. Thank you so much for making it possible. And remember, when you're out and about, please always remember to wear those masks. Have a great night. Stay safe. Good night.